Good morning. I'm Amy Johnson from the Midwest Manufacturers Association office. I will be your moderator during today's presentation. This webinar is scheduled to last 1 hour. If you could please place your virtual name tag on by renaming your profile with both your name and company name. Q&A will be held at the end of the presentation via the chat function. This webinar will be recorded and available on each association website located under the Events tab. With that, I will now pass the microphone over to our Amfa Board President, Wade Carnes.
Thank you, Amy. Good morning, everybody. I am Wade Carnes, and I'm extending a warm welcome from Amfa, CMMA, and Tri-State to everybody here. We appreciate you taking time from your schedule to join us today. Our goal is to provide content that specifically helps manufacturers and to provide manufacturing solutions. Today, we welcome you to session 7 of our marketing series, featuring a discussion on how strategy and planning can make your marketing tactics successful. I'd like to introduce you to our speaker today, Halliday, President of Anchor Marketing. Anchor Marketing is a branding and new media agency that specializes in successful differentiation and positioning. Before joining Anchor Marketing, Hal spent more than 12 years working for manufacturers of consumer products and packaging equipment. He was involved with selling product, managing accounts, and working with overall brand management. Anchor Marketing has spent more than 20 years building brands for manufacturers across the United States and Canada, and they help businesses move from make it up as you go marketing to planned efforts with measurable results. And with that, I will now turn your attention over to Hal.
Hey, good morning, everyone, and thank you for your time. I'll see if I can talk and click at the same time here to share my screen. So with that, Amy, can you just confirm that I've got the right screen in front of everyone?
Looks good, Hal.
All right, great. And Amy, do you want me to start my video?
Yeah, we'd love to see you.
There we go. Okay. So great. So thank you for attending, everyone. I have a ton of material, so I'm going to jump right into it. Just a little bit about me and my background. I've been with Anchor Marketing for about 11 years now. Prior to that, I worked for a company that I think maybe a member or a subsidiary of a member of this organization, Pace Group. We manufactured industrial liquid filling equipment. And I really cut my teeth a long time ago manufacturing consumer packaged goods for the pet food industry. And coincidentally, I also head up another manufacturers association, Highway 2 West. We're tucked up in Northwest Minnesota. I've really spent my entire career on manufacturing and the subsequent sales channel that's involved. Anchor Marketing doesn't do a lot with hot dog stands or coffee shops. We're really focused primarily on manufacturing and distribution. So for our agenda today, I'm going to talk quite a bit about strategy. You're going to hear that word quite a bit. And it's important because without strategy, the messages that we create and the media tactics that we choose can be less effective, and in some cases, not effective at all. So we have this strategy first mantra that we follow. We're going to talk about target audiences and how we approach segmenting our audiences. We'll talk about the actions or the perceptions that we want from those audiences and get a little bit into messaging and a few media considerations. And then at the end, I've got some favorite resources that I refer to quite often that I'll provide. And some of those resources are also impacted or shown in the slide deck. So strategy first, tactics last. And I always feel like it's important to bring this up because most often if we're sitting down and engaging a new client and we're talking about strategy and marketing, everyone feels like they're compelled to start talking about media tactics, Facebook or trade magazines or the radio or whatever it may be. And so we usually say, look, let's put that on hold for a minute and let's go back to the very beginning. And so we use this acronym TAM just to illustrate this, is that we want to make sure we are talking about the right target audiences, and we know what action or perception we want those audiences to have, so we can craft the correct message and then start picking media tactics to the right choices for those audiences. So it sounds kind of weird, but marketing really should be a consideration way back when you're sitting down with that napkin and you're doing your strategic planning. And strategic planning is pretty simple. It's where are we today? How do we get here? Where do we want to go? How are we going to get there? And what's in our way? And you'll see that oftentimes vision, mission, goals, those kinds of things are very impactful on a strategic marketing plan. So that's where we start oftentimes with clients, is making sure that there's some current strategic planning done. And if not, we'd like to jump in and do that. We also like to make sure that clients have a business plan in place. And people think, well, what's a business plan have to do with marketing? And a well-written business plan not only defines what you sell, but it does a market analysis, and it provides us an opportunity to look at the competitors that you're up against and really start to try and find a position in the market that is unique to you, and something that customers will start to recognize you by. I really like this book by Al Ries and Jack Trout, Positioning. It does a great job as far as explaining how you compare to your competitors. Once a business plan is in place, I found a really killer resource for business model generation. And again, we're talking about things that really precede a strategic marketing plan. I really like how simple this is, because a business model is largely about, what's our costs? How do we add value to our costs in a way where people will buy that finished product from us in the form of revenue? So you can see right in the middle, they even talk about value propositions. That's the heart of marketing and a lot of what we focus on. And they even talk a little bit about channels, whether it be sales channels or distribution channels or communication channels. There's been a lot of disruption in the last 5 or 10 years. And as a result, customers research, purchase, transport things differently. They use buying platforms. The sales channel's been greatly disrupted. And then it also gives us an opportunity to really start to list those customer segments we've got, whether it be customers, employees, end users, collaborators, people that influence our sales and our sales process. So if we have a strong business model in place, generally we start getting into some of the marketing items with a SWOT analysis. And I like to do a SWOT analysis because the strengths and opportunities are large contributors to your value proposition and your marketing message. And weaknesses and those external threats, those are more operational things. Those are things that the leadership in your company may make decisions to change or take action on that will then contribute to the strengths and opportunities that we use to start building your marketing messaging. So when we talk about strategy first, and I mentioned positioning a little while ago, not only taking into consideration what you do, but what your competitors are doing. A great example is the law of the category. Is everyone knows that Charles Lindbergh was the first person to fly across the Atlantic Ocean. Not many people know that Bert Hinkler was the second one. He did it faster, he did it with less fuel. But nobody knows about Bert Hinkler because he did not claim that position of first in that category. But along comes Amelia Earhart, and she took a position as being the first woman to accomplish different firsts with flying. And so with positioning, a lot of times we're trying to figure out We don't want to claim a position that our competitors have. We want to find our own unique position. And then we start defining objectives. You know, what does success look like? What are a successful marketing campaign? What does that look like? One of the goals is to make sure that marketing is not trying to dig a tunnel and sales is building a bridge. You know, those are definitely misaligned strategies. So we always want to make sure that we have written objectives in the strategy so our salespeople are saying the same things that we are, and we can provide them with the messaging so that they are all aligned in that unified message that they're sharing with customers and prospects. Then we get into some really nerdy marketing stuff. This is anybody who took a marketing course in school would recognize this. I remember in college, you could memorize the 4 Ps and recite product, price, place, promotion, and you got a passing grade. Well, what they didn't tell us in marketing school, and we learn the hard way when we get out into the real world, is that products are commodities. And you know, for us to really focus heavily on just products for marketing, there's a limit to what we can do, because again, in general, marketing is, or products are commodities. Price is not as relevant as people think. I always follow the philosophy that if your price is too high or if your price is too low, you're not going to be in business very long. You know, price is something that we as marketers don't talk a lot about. They also didn't tell us in marketing school that the place is not just a retail store. That has to do with your sales channel. It has to do with the communication channel you use to reach customers, et cetera, et cetera. So point being is that promotion deserves the most attention. How do we talk about your products? How do we talk about your company? What's the reputation that we want? So again, strategy first. Target, action, message, media. So let's spend some time talking about target audiences. And I'm going to give you a few pointers just based on working with multiple companies in the past, some pitfalls and things to avoid. The first thing, sooner or later, I have to tell every client this, is that don't base your branding and communication strategies on what you think unless you fit the target audience profile to a T. And once people accept that and realize that they may not be their target audience, then they're more open to the messages and tactics that will reach the people that they're trying to communicate to. So we generally start to define target audience segments because the message for a consumer or end user could very well be different than somebody that's in the sales channel, whether it's a distributor or retailer or online. And we never want to forget about your sales team, that you always have to have your sales team be able to articulate your value proposition, or you're going to suffer, and they're going to suffer from that. And I always use the example with target audience segmentation of Campbell's soup, is that the mom or dad that are buying soup for their children really care about how it tastes, and it's safe, and it's healthy. But the retailer may not care as much about that. The retailer may care that it sells and they can make a profit and they get a lot of turns at their store shelf. Whereas the distributor cares that it comes in a pallet that fits on their truck and there's not a lot of damage, et cetera, et cetera. So we have to really segment our audiences. And some segmentation is easy. You know, maybe your geography is North America. Well, we don't have to necessarily spend a lot of time focusing on geography then. We also look at things like demographics or firmographics. Demographics are primarily if we're trying to reach consumers, or if we're in an industry that's heavily slanted towards men or slanted towards women. But overall in manufacturing, and especially if it's business to business, we focus on firmographics. But the real challenge and the most important thing is the psychographics. Psychographics are tough to define. They're generally what things keep people up at night? What are the problems that they want to solve? What are the things that annoy them? What are the things that they'd like to see? What situation are they in? All these really touchy-feely things about our target audience fall into that psychographics category. And this isn't really anything new. You start looking at something like table salt, and Morton back in the late 1800s, they discovered that, as everyone knew, that if it rained, salt would stick together. It didn't pour very well. So Morton Salt came up with the idea of adding, and I can't remember the chemical compound, it's calcium, something that would keep the salt from clumping together. And their slogan was, when it rains, it pours. And the point being of that is that Morton Salt didn't focus on what they were selling. They focused on the unmet needs from the customers, and that became the source of their differentiation. So when you look at those two rings, there's generally not perfect alignment between what you're offering and what your customers want. So the focus of marketing is identifying those unmet needs and coming up with innovations and ideas that solve those problems. And you can see, even if you do the math, Morton Salt still gets about an 85% premium for their brand at retail, just because of that strong brand that they've built based on that problem they solved 150 years ago. As we all know, those product innovations are easily copied by competitors, and over time we have to keep reinventing ourselves, or we run the risk of just becoming a commodity. So here's a great example. We have a client who's an electrical distributor. Their products are commodities. They're selling copper wire, they're selling outlets, switch plates, all the different things that electrical contractors need. And they're trying to increase the non-product value of their brand, what they're offering to their customers. And so their strategy is really to identify a common pain point and provide a solution to resolve that pain point. So they rolled up their sleeves, they started doing segmentation, and they focused on journeymen, master electricians. They found that a lot of these small contractors, they were working as an electrician for a contractor, and they thought, hey, you know what? I'm going to strike out on my own business. I think I can do this for myself, and then I'll get all the money. But they found that a lot of these people didn't have any business training. They didn't have a budget. They didn't know how to measure their costs and their revenues, and they weren't charging their customers enough. The electrical contractors were not charging their customers enough. And so they're like, man, if we could help these guys and gals and help them be successful in their business, we'll have a loyal customer for a long, long time. So we got together and we came up with a solution for that, and we designed something called Budget Shaper. And what this does is it enables them to put in all their costs, what they'll bill their contractors or their electricians at. They can enter overhead, they can enter how much money they make on materials that they sell. They can enter what they want for profit. And in the top right, you'll see where I've circled, they have an hourly rate that they need to survive and an hourly rate that they're generating. And then they could use this for what ifs. What if I buy another truck, or what if I add another electrician that only works half time and whatnot? And there's still, we introduced this 10 years ago, and there are still contractors that say, that really saved me. These guys, I'm so loyal to them because they helped solve a problem that would have put me out of business. So again, looking for those unmet needs, and oftentimes non-product innovations can be very powerful in the strategy behind your marketing. We have another client, they're in the paint and coatings industry, and they wanted to increase their sales by 25%. And it's so competitive and so saturated, they thought, well, let's identify a new market for our existing electrostatic coating technology beyond things like powder coating. Some of the manufacturers on this call may do powder coating, and they may see some of this already in the literature that's coming out to them. But what they've decided to do is they're going to apply that technology into the food and beverage industry and approach cost auditors because they're finding that, like in potato chip manufacturing, for example, that there's a lot of waste with the spices or the seasonings that are put on potato chips. So they figured out a way to demonstrate a return on investment and opportunities to cut costs to these cost auditors. And as a result, then they're hoping to grow their market share. So again, it's a really strong foundation for marketing messaging in ways to brag about the value proposition that a company can offer. As I mentioned before, competitive advantages fade over time. And I'm sure many of you have heard the silly joke about three guys in the woods and they're being chased by a big grizzly bear. And one guy stops and he's like, what are you stopping for? And he's putting on his tennis shoes. And he said, you're not going to outrun the bear. And he said, no. He says, I'm going to outrun the two of you. And so as a result, everybody who's running away from bears stops and puts on their tennis shoes, and then we're all even. So what's the next innovation that we're going to do as a company to outrun that bear? So target audiences, just to sum that up, we need to segment, we need to do deep dives and really look for opportunities to solve pain points for those audiences. And then we get into the actionable part of our strategy. And action sometimes isn't literal actions that people take. Sometimes it's a perception or what they think, or if people ask them what they think about your company, what they'll say. But overall, it's how we want to be perceived by our target audiences. It's a pretty lengthy discussion for that. I don't know if we have enough time to do a deep dive into that today, but action perception are very important. And where do we find action? I'll show my years here from Highlights for Children as, if you remember as a kid, Goofus and Gallant. Goofus only talks about his products and wonders why his communications are not very effective. Whereas Gallant listens to his customers and creates content that is of value to his audience. So point being is that we need to do deep dives with our customers and ask them, and that is the source of our marketing and our differentiation beyond talking about our products. So when we get into the messaging part of it, content is the most significant opportunity to share your message. And content is pretty vague. That can be written documents, it can be video, it can be any way that we communicate our brand messages to our audiences. A really good definition for content marketing is from the Content Marketing Institute. I really like their definition here is that content marketing is the strategic marketing approach of creating and distributing valuable, relevant, and consistent content to attract and acquire a clearly defined audience with the objective of driving profitable customer action. Great definition. And they tell you flat out, don't just pitch your products and services. You need to educate your buyers and again, help them be more intelligent, solve problems for them. And here's what I really consider to be a content litmus test, is if the content that you're writing is not something that someone would be willing to share or show someone else, it's not necessarily hitting the mark. So we always want to find content that's interesting, something that they'll say, hey, look at this is a great idea. So I'll give you a few examples. We do some work for a company down in Tennessee. They're a systems integration company. And so they work with Fortune 100 manufacturers with their process engineering. And they started out by restating the questions that their customers were bringing to them. We need to improve our stock preparation process in order to reduce fiber loss and downtime during stock grade changes. So they heard that problem and that became part of their content, part of their marketing message. Or in the paper industry, they have old paper mills that have obsolete control systems that need to be upgraded. And when those mills are down, they can lose 6 figures in the course of a week. So it's really important for them to be able to deliver content that helps these this client get found by people looking for solutions. A couple of examples from that client. Or we have another client where they do a lot of work in flight avionics, motion testing. And this client, the stuff that they talk about is really over our head, but to their audience, this content makes perfect sense. They're talking about IMUs and some of the testing equipment. So we're always striving to make sure that we identify what the challenge the customer's facing is, help write the solution, and then talk about the outcome as far as how they solve that problem. And even ourselves, 9 months ago when COVID hit, all of our clients are saying, great, we can't do a trade show. How are we going to do virtual trade shows? And we came up with an opinion piece about the best way to help overcome that challenge that our clients were facing. Sometimes we get a little weird. We're marketing people and we make up things like Fenderbergs. But most often when we get their attention and people read our content, they start to see a message that can be of value to them. So speaking of content, there's one thing that I think is very important for us to all talk about is gated content. And for those of you that aren't sure what gated content is stuff where you put a teaser out there and then you require people to sign up for or give you their email address or divulge who they are because they feel like what you're going to provide to them is worth them giving you their contact information because they're where you're going to call them and try and sell something to them. And when I see that, so many manufacturers have these secrets that they don't want to divulge. And in 3 or 6 months, they're no longer secrets because the word gets out. Their competitors start to find, that, and they've really wasted an opportunity to be first in the market. So I always encourage clients, and I say, look, if you have some extremely innovative ideas or some things that are going to turn some heads, you have an opportunity to be first, just like Charles Lindbergh was, and not be second like Bert Hinkler was. But gate it. Make sure that you get the right information. Don't let it go to Gmails. Don't let it go to your competitors' email addresses. Make sure that you vet and verify who you're providing those big secrets to. And so we'll talk a little bit about media. The last M in the TAM strategy is media tactics for all practical purposes have changed. In the good old days, it was just a lot of stuff that's thrown on the wall. There's television, newspaper, radio, et cetera, et cetera. Those days are gone. And one thing that we notice about media is that in the old days, the TV station or the newspaper or the radio jockey, they were writing the content. And the only way that we could get any sort of voice in traditional media was to pay for advertising. So it was very, very costly, so to speak. And when you look at how things are today we write the content. Look at social media, Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter. They don't create any content. It's all created by the users. So again, that really verifies that the content that we write is important. And there's a little sidebar with content is it's also important to not only create that content, but to get it on your site, get it in your social media so that Google can crawl that information and say, okay, I understand what this company is offering, and make a connection between you and people that are searching for the types of solutions that you're providing in your content. Another huge consideration in content is how it's being consumed. So here's a picture. I was lucky enough to be at the last pre-COVID NCAA men's basketball championship game at US Bank Stadium. And so when there was a break in the action, I was taking pictures of the crowd. And this picture does no justice, but it was like a 1980s Ted Nugent concert where everybody had their lighter up in the air, but this time it was a cell phone. And, you know, everyone is consuming media on their cell phones today. Extremely, extremely important. So we're scheduled for me to be through 11:45 today, and I've just got a few more slides to cover here, and then we'll open things up for questions. But I wanted to give you just a list of things to do before you invest in media or before you buy any advertising. Is revisit your business model. You know, make sure that you understand in that business model what your value proposition is. Perform strategic planning. You'd be surprised the things that can come from that. And it's a very healthy exercise. And in fact, we do that at the front end of a marketing plan if that's not been provided to us. Take a lot of time to engage your customers. Ask them what their problems are. Ask them how things could be working better. Once you define your value proposition, you know, apply that TAM strategy. Make sure that you segment your target audiences before you do any copywriting, creating any content, or choosing media tactics. Write it down, put it down into a plan, and then execute. Execution is the biggest challenge, but if you have it written down, it makes it a lot easier to do that. And then, you know, I always like to share some of my favorites. So my favorite brand message was done by Powerade about 5 years ago. And if we think about it, what is Powerade selling? They sell water. It's a commodity. And how do they add value? Well, they have electrolytes, vitamins, minerals. They have that grippy bottle for sweaty hands, really cool colors. You know, now they have different sugar-free variations. So a lot of that marketing was geared towards the 17-year-old girl who's playing soccer or the 18-year-old kid that's playing football. They were the end user, but Powerade was really smart about this, and they started doing a deep dive, and they're looking at segmenting and realizing that it's largely moms that are buying Powerade. And what do moms want? They don't care about how it tastes. They don't care about the electrolytes or the vitamins. Moms care that when little Jimmy is having adversity, that he can power through it, and he'll get through that adversity that he's facing in a sports environment. And so Powerade found was just gold. If you ever go onto YouTube, search for Nico Powerade soccer, and it's about a 2-minute video segment from Nico from the time he's an infant up until he's in college. And it's the true essence of what a brand is when they focus on segmenting the actual buyer, the one who's making the purchase decision. Very powerful message. One of the last things that I provide is I have a few of my favorites. My predecessor at Anchor wrote a book called The Scoop. It really defines the TAM strategy. We have it available on Amazon, but if you know somebody like me, I can provide that to you free of charge. I still really like the book Start With Why by Simon Sinek. He's done some TED Talks, but the book does a great job as far as getting beyond products and differentiating features and talking more about you know, why do you exist for your customers, and really getting at the essence of that brand. And then some real short, brief reads are the 22 Immutable Laws of Marketing by Al Ries and Jack Trout. They're really good gut checks, and they help you keep from making some real fundamental marketing mistakes. And then along the bottom, I've got to tell you, I really like the Strategizer series. They have a book on business model generation. They have a book on value proposition design, testing ideas, Invincible Company. They really do a nice job with it, and they have some actionable things that you can do with your marketing team to lead them through that. beyond that, I just I want to make sure we have enough time for questions. So Amy, I'll open that up to you if you have any questions for the people who have asked.
Yeah, absolutely. And just as a reminder, feel free to submit your questions via the chat function. You can either send it privately to myself or publicly, and I will relay that question to Hal for you. So we do have one to start us off here. You talked about content. How does content generate leads for our salespeople?
Great question. I mentioned earlier in the presentation that not only do we generate content, but if we get the content formatted the right way as copy on your website or in your social media feeds, or text that backs up, let's say if you're doing a podcast, that's searchable. Google finds that. And if you are using any sort of marketing automation, it can even map it back to the type of content that people saw. And it can turn into a genuine lead that you can provide to your salespeople. This person engaged in this content, and these are the actions that they took. Please call them. And salespeople love that, warm leads.
Great, thank you. Next question here. How often should we be creating and sharing content with customers and prospects?
It really depends on your customers and the type of environment that they're in. I can really say that I would recommend erring on the side of sharing it less frequently rather than sharing it too frequently. And another thing that has to do with frequency is I tell people this all the time, and some people don't like to hear this, but your clients don't necessarily love Merry Christmas, Happy Thanksgiving, Happy Grandparents' Day, all those things on the social media feed, because when you look at the engagement of those posts, they're really low. And the last thing that we want is to have you get a reputation as far as sharing noise in that channel. I'm sure everyone, when they look at their email inbox or when they're reading media, they realize that there's tons of noise out there. So again, share fewer than too many, and make darn sure that that content is of value, or you're going to be relegated to a noisemaker, and it's detrimental to the quality of your brand. What else do you have, Amy?
Well, thank you. Another question here. Is Facebook important for business-to-business marketing?
You can really make a case for Facebook depending on what your objectives are. If you're a manufacturer and you tell me that you're trying to reach maintenance engineers in a manufacturing facility, I'm probably not going to get too excited about Facebook. But if you tell me that you're really trying to hire and find people, and you're trying to reach people in your region and talk about the culture in your organization and try and get more applications coming through the door, I think Facebook's fantastic. And we even did something with a client where we focused on they were trying to hire, it was predominantly, the business owner is predominantly men. And, we men, we have this tendency to whine and complain to our wives and our girlfriends. So we had a very successful effort where we're approaching women on Facebook and saying, are you tired of hearing your husband/boyfriend complain about his job? Well, here, tell them to come our direction. And they had people that came in and they said flat out, my girlfriend told me to quit complaining and told me to come in and talk to you guys. She saw you were looking to hire on Facebook. So it's right for the right application.
Great, thank you. Do you listen to podcasts? And if so, are there any marketing content podcasts that you would recommend?
I do. I listen to podcasts that are largely geared towards agencies. So you might listen to it and think, well, this is kind of weird. So I would recommend listening to podcasts that your customers are listening to. I think you'll get a lot of ideas from that as far as crafting your messaging. I could look through and give some more specific recommendations from a marketing standpoint. And anybody who's searched for relevant podcasts, again, will go, there is a ton of noise out there, and we want to make sure that we're selecting the ones that actually are of value.
Great. Are there any other questions for Hal? Feel free to use the chat function or unmute yourself. And Hal, while we wait for that, do you have any final thoughts for the audience today?
Yeah, oftentimes I'll do these types of presentations in person, and I'll ask by a show of hands how many people have an actual written strategic marketing plan in their hands on paper. And it always surprises me. It's about 1 in 20 have actually have it written down, 1 in 10 in that range. And so that's a huge red flag. And if you're investing your limited marketing resources on tactics and things like social media, but you don't have a written plan in place, it's really going to be hard to demonstrate a return on that investment. So it's important to have that written down.
Great, thank you. Well, I would like to thank Hal for taking the time to share his expertise with us. And I'd also like to thank the audience for your continued support. For anyone that does have additional questions about the presentation or our manufacturing associations, a few of us will stay online at the end here. For those that are logging off, enjoy the remainder of your week. We'll see you again next month for the continuation of the marketing series. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.